patch a roof, or even drive a simple nail into the wall on which to hang a picture. For all of these things, he was less than useless. He would look at a hammer or a wrench with a discernible unease, the great brain suddenly uncertain how to proceed. What were these strange platonic symbols for, exactly? He seemed to be thinking. And I didn't write this, but just to put it in, you know, to think you could go 88 years through life and not acquire these things that we don't remember learning. We just, you know, who doesn't know how to use a screwdriver, for Christ's sake? That takes itself a kind of tremendous ability of some kind to just not learn those things. And, but of course that was, everybody knew that about Dad. But he was everybody's go-to guy for matters of the mind. If Proust was your problem, Dad had your back. Wittgensteinian conundrum, 423-7287 is your lucky number. Or in more recent times, 86045, but it'll always be 423-7287 to me. Need to hear some Coleridge or Dickinson, Larkin, Shakespeare, hankering for some Hardy, Wordsworth, Shelley, or Pound. The poetry hotline was always open for business, and on request, reams upon reams would unspool, cross-reference with annotations, and in Latin or French if you preferred. Though Dad was an academic and an intellectual, he was not a snob, and the one thing he couldn't abide was pretentiousness, as I often learned the hard way. Some dads got out the belt, but he got out the withering reproof whenever I claimed to have read something I hadn't, or offered someone else's opinion as my own, which he had an uncanny ability to detect. He never, however, ridiculed a dumb thing honestly said. There was no such thing to him. He valued approaching the subject with honesty above all else. We need almost to sneak up on art that has been much commented upon in order to see it as it is, before inherited preconceptions distort it. He had this ability to see things as if anew. He was always gentle in his criticism and never made you feel a fool. Also, the man who loved Proust and thought day and night about the nature of consciousness and the meaning of art maintained throughout his life a kind of regular guy touch, if the regular guy was Mr. Magoo. He didn't act differently talking to poets and philosophers than he did barbers and landscapers, and it shows in the loyalty of his non-academic acquaintances and friends, and his to them. While he necessarily spent large periods in solitude, submerged, and this too could be held against him in some cases, he nevertheless cared deeply about all the people in his life, and delighted in hearing about their joys, and also felt their grief. Though my father's career did not set the literary world ablaze, as had been predicted by Lord Trilling at its launch, he never seemed particularly bothered, though this he may have in part hid from me. He never did write the book in capital letters. For those who do suffer such disappointments, it is a difficult thing to conceal, often resulting in damage to the very things that inspired him in the first place. Speaking of two talented but unproductive young would-be poets present at her soirees, Gertrude Stein remarked that they were like syrup that wouldn't pour. But Dad poured plenty, but only in private with his friends and students. What remained astonishing to me is how his relationship with the things he fell in love with as a young man never lessened in intensity. His curiosity and appetite for experience was inexhaustible and outstripped my own years ago. You could hear it in the way he talked about writers and composers and artists that he had spent decades absorbing, or the latest novel by Franzen. He didn't know one Cézanne sans victoire landscape, but dozens, as his understandings of the painting evolved and deepened over the years. Though he had read and reread many works constantly, he was always alive to their original spell, and we were all familiar with how he had a kind of ecstatic state. He would relate some new observation, sterling in its originality. Man is not mind alone, particularly to his family, who are helpless to love him. But my father was inescapably a mind. I say inescapably because he was not by choice someone who might say, I rather think I'd like to be an intellectual and spout poetry for a living. But rather due to whatever mysterious spell it was that alighted upon him all those years ago in Newark. Perhaps it floated in with the music through an open window of the public library where the 17-year-old had sat studying one summer evening. As it happened, Elgar's The Enigma Variations were being performed at a concert hall next door. And it was a mystery that held him there transfixed, the sudden apprehension of the perfect beauty art alone provides. This was the first such powerful experience, but it would not be the last. So,
good job.
So thank you all.
So, glad you came.